building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, as the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues and the West and Russia close their airspaces off to each other, what's the impact on airlines and passengers? What does this mean for prices and your spring or summer travel? Also, an honest conversation about the pandemic's impact on Bay Area children, hearing directly from the kids themselves. Our media partner, the San Francisco Standard, shares what San Francisco students told them about their experiences the last 2 years. But first, Governor Newsom in his State of the State last night promising to bring some relief to Californians struggling to pay for the skyrocketing gas price.
In January, we proposed a pause to the gas tax increase. Now it's clear we have to go farther. And that's why, working with legislative leadership, I'll be submitting a proposal to put money back in the pockets of Californians to address rising gas prices.
Gas prices, already high from inflation, have surged even higher since the Biden administration banned Russian oil imports, trying to put the financial squeeze on Russian President Vladimir Putin after he invaded Ukraine. There are competing ideas, though, for what may help in the short term as well as the long term. Here with one perspective is Kara Green, spokesperson for the Western States Petroleum Association, a trade group made up of oil companies such as BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, and more. Sarah, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Kristen.
So explain, because Russian oil is not a big percentage of the oil we use here in the U.S., less than 10%, and there is a lag time, right? So it's not like there's an immediate shortage. Explain why prices at the pump are already so high.
Right. Well, it's important to know that many factors can influence the price of gasoline and diesel, but the primary driver is those dynamics of supply and demand. And then when you have unforeseen events like what's going on in Ukraine and around Europe, that's also going to have significant impacts on what consumers feel at the pump.
Before we get to that more, especially the supply and demand issue, Governor Newsom last night proposed a tax rebate to help Californians. The details of that are still being worked out. And then there's this other proposal that some Democratic leaders actually don't support, and that is to suspend an increase to California's gas tax increase that was supposed to go up in July, I think. And Republicans, of course, actually want to eliminate the gas tax altogether. What's your position? What's your view on the gas tax's role in all this?
Well, it was nice to hear the governor acknowledge that the incredibly high taxes and fees that Californians pay at the pump is hurting everyday families who want to heat and cool their home. They want to drive their kids to school. They want to go into work after the pandemic. Now, we don't know the details of a rebate or any proposal, so it's difficult to comment. But however it turns out, it's going to be a temporary solution. And I think Californians deserve a real plan for our legislature and our administration to provide affordable, reliable energy to almost 40 million Californians.
So how do you propose that be done? What is your long-term fix?
Oil is of abundance in California, and greater domestic production in the U.S. and especially in California can help families buffer against the ups and downs of supply distributions. I mean, when we look at every barrel that's not produced in California, it's replaced by a barrel that comes over from foreign sources on a tanker. And oftentimes, Kristen, those countries do not share Californians' philosophies on environmental stewardship, human rights, or political philosophies.
The governor was clear last night, though, in rejecting more oil drilling as a solution. He says, if anything, this war and the rising cost of gas only shows the state must be freed, quote unquote, once and for all from the grasp of petro-dictators. Your thoughts?
I think that's an incredibly short-sighted outlook. We have 40 million Californians now, and the demand for affordable, reliable energy will continue to grow. I think that our state needs an all-of-the-above strategy. We are a great source for solar, wind, hydrogen. Our members are already experimenting in the, in the biofuels area. And so rather than bans and mandates and withholding permits, Californians should be focused on steps to have a reliable and sustainable energy future so that we have clean energy, an abundance of it, And really what it means to me is that Californians' energy dependence is a type of national security.
But environmentalists will point out, right, that fossil fuels do produce large quantities of carbon dioxide when burned, and carbon emissions trap heat in the atmosphere and lead to climate change. And Governor Newsom last night also talked about, climate change means more extreme drought, more wildfires, all that. So I'm going to ask you, is it responsible to our planet, even when we're feeling the oil squeeze in this moment, to pursue a longer-term policy of more oil exploration and production?
Well, I want to correct the record. I didn't say more exploration. I said the pumps that are already open, the production sites that are already open, allowing that to come from California and to our refineries, as opposed to producing it in another part of the world that doesn't have the incredibly stringent clean standards that we have here in California that we're so proud of. And I also want to point out some special things about California's fuel. We have a mandated fuel blend that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. We, as part of the industry and as drivers, you are paying $1.27 per gallon at the pump for gasoline that goes to the cap and trade program, low carbon fuel standard. And these are regulatory programs that are all focused on bringing down greenhouse gas emissions in California.
This is true. The gas here certainly is cleaner burning, and there are a lot of environmental protections built in here that other states don't have. But I just want to ask you, though, in 2020, your group stood against the governor's order directing the state to require that by 2035, all new cars and passenger trucks sold here be zero emission. And last year, you stood against his order to ban all new oil fracking by 2024. Those are initiatives many Californians support. So I wonder why, if you think they would support your call for more oil produced here now.
I think what Californians want is affordable and reliable energy. When we watch social media and see what's going on in Europe, we see significant supply and demand issues. We want to continue our lives as we know it, and oil, gasoline, is a big part of that and will continue to be in the future. And it is just one part of the many types of energy sources that are celebrated here in California.
Sounds like to me you're saying that it's not a binary choice of renewable or fossil, right? That we need to pursue all strategies. Is that what you're saying? But do you think the formula could be shifting more towards renewable all the time?
For our Californians to figure out at the ballot box and who they're voting for. I think it's something that's going to be incredibly driven by technology and what's available. And I'm proud that our member companies invest more than the US federal government as a whole at innovative and new strategies and different energy strategies. We are part of that. I'm absolutely thrilled that you understand it's not a binary choice. And I think it's important for Californians to understand there are many ways to get energy here in our large state, and oil will continue to be part of them.
All right, real quickly before we go, if I can get your predictions and look into that crystal ball as far as how high prices can go at the pump. As you know, here in California, we're paying close to $6 already per gallon. What do you think? Are we nearing the peak?
Well, I can't speculate on the price of gasoline. As I said, that's made up of supply and demand factors and unforeseen events in the world. What's most important is that California remains energy independent from foreign sources, and that helps our national security. It helps keep energy affordable and reliable.
Kara Green with the Western States Petroleum Association, thank you so much for your time and your opinion today. Appreciate it. All right, coming up, it's not only high gas prices having an impact on travel. What about Russian airspace bans? There's a two-way ban going on that's really impacting the airlines. And that's not just about your travel. It's also about the movement of goods. So we'll have an expert talking about that when we come back. All right, thanks for joining us. Stick around. We really want to get into how the airlines have had to change routes, cancel routes as a result of all these airspace closures. That's coming your way next. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has led to the closure of airspaces by both Russia and the democratic nations that stand opposed to his war. And that's led to a huge disruption to air travel, leading some airlines to scrap some routes altogether. Joining us now to talk about this issue, Willis Orlando, Senior Product Operations Specialist for Scott's Cheap Travel. Willis, it's been a while. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Well, coming in virtually over Zoom. But can you tell us which countries have closed down their airspaces to which other countries?
So basically what we have right now is a tit for tat between much of Europe, the United States, Canada, and Russia. So just kind of think of it this way. Russian planes are generally not able to fly over Canadian airspace, UK's airspace, much of Europe's airspace. And likewise, European planes, Canadian planes, American planes can't fly over Russian airspace.
Okay. Well, Russia has so much airspace because it's got so much land. How has this affected travel between, say, Europe and Asia, or maybe U.S. to Europe or U.S. to Asia? Basically, which routes have been rerouted or canceled?
So the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is we're not seeing kind of this influx of new routes to Asia as the continent opens up. We saw a whole bunch of openings happening. We thought we'd have more planes flying between the U.S. and Asia and between Europe and Asia. And airlines have decided, hey, listen, it's not worth, these long circuitous routes to go around. So we're not going to add more planes to these routes. Instead, we're going to double down on transatlantic travel. And so, there's more planes between the U.S. and Europe instead.
Okay. But I have heard, though, that there's been some rerouting that's led to longer flights, like going longer distances. Can you tell us about those?
There certainly have. Yeah, we saw, for example, a Japan Airlines flight that did the old polar route, where it actually passes within 900 miles of the North Pole, where it goes over Alaska. It's this kind of wild circuitous route to get as high up as you possibly can to avoid Russian airspace. Folks who do want to fly these direct routes between, say, London and Tokyo, they have to figure something out, right? Going over Russia is the most direct route to go.
Yeah.
So otherwise, they have to go kind of these longer routes. And with fuel prices being so high, there's a cost to be paid there because you're adding hours and hours of travel to each flight.
Right. All right. So because of the jet fuel costing the airlines more, passengers are paying more. So we are already seeing that reflected in airfares?
We're not quite seeing it yet reflected in airfares because there's generally a lag. Right? Some airlines hedge fuel. British Airways and Lufthansa are very good examples of that, where they hedge fuel. They've kind of bought in at a certain rate. It's looking like a good gamble right now. Others buy fuel weeks or months ahead of time. So we're not quite yet seeing it trickle into fares, though I would expect if this lasts that we'd start to see it trickle into fares in the next month or so.
Okay, so what does that mean then in terms of us buying our summer trip airfares or airline tickets then? Should we move now? Because, I had also heard before this war that we should wait because as COVID subsides and more places open, airlines will add more routes and price will actually come down. So now we're kind of stuck. I don't know what to do.
That's absolutely, I mean, you were right to be confused. We were kind of moving in one direction. Now we're saying, wait, hold on, be aggressive because we don't know. If this thing persists for a month, 2 months, 3 months or more, at some point, inevitably, this extra cost airlines are paying is going to trickle down to the consumer. So we're saying, especially if you want to fly between the U.S. and Europe, where there's a lot of capacity, at the moment, prices are quite low. We saw $463 round trip between SFO and Italy just this week. Lock in those low prices now because who knows what things are going to look like if this crisis persists.
All right. Let me just, preface this by saying that the Ukrainian tragedy is so great and travel is such a minor thing in comparison. Nonetheless, it does affect millions of people, so we should still have the conversation and get the information out there. But it's also not just about business or leisure travel, right? I mean, don't these planes, the same planes, also move a lot of cargo, and the global economy kind of depends on the movement of these goods?
That's absolutely right. And these large jets, cargo carriage, it's a huge part of what they do. And so if they're paying double, triple for fuel, you can expect, again, that price to kind of trickle throughout the entire economy for imported goods and exported goods as well. It's a really tough situation. And you can also expect that hit to come a little bit earlier because there's not the same kind of competition in the cargo space as there is in the passenger travel space. You don't have budget airlines who are kind of pushing prices down the way you do for passenger travel.
Got it. I wonder if the airlines are trying to fly far, far away from the Russian border right now, because we do remember a couple of tragedies. There was that Korean airliner, New York to Seoul, shot down when it accidentally flew into Russian airspace in 1983. And then in 2014, a Malaysia Airlines flight was shot down over eastern Ukraine in the separatist region. So do you know if they're skirting far, far away from the border?
It's funny. If you pull up flight trackers right now, you can kind of see this gigantic gap that kind of goes over Belarus, Ukraine, and most of Russia. So planes are really giving good leeway over all three of those countries. Belarus hasn't attacked anybody, but they're aligned with Russia, and airlines are being careful with what they're doing. It's an interesting situation. That said, most of the most popular routes at the moment kind of already skirt this airspace by quite a large margin. So it's not resulting in major changes to most of those popular routes Europeans and Americans are flying.
Okay. I think until this came up, people hadn't really thought about this, but during non-war times, commercial carriers from democratic nations fly through Russian airspace all the time and vice versa, right?
That's absolutely right. And it's a source of revenue for Russia. It's a source of kind of leverage for Russia as well. It's a very interesting and complicated situation. So the decision by Russia to close down airspace to Western jets and by U.S. airlines, like United, kind of held off for a few days, saying, "Hey, we're going to keep flying these routes." The decision to close that down was really a very significant global decision. Russia's status, occupying the entire northern part of the Eastern Hemisphere, really gives them a ton of leverage over global air travel.
Look, if anyone has to travel, if they're planning a last minute, for example, spring trip, what would you advise in terms of both like the flights and also the safety?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if you were planning to go to Eastern Europe to gallivant and have fun, I'd put that trip off. I don't want to say anything bad is going to happen, but I'd say it's not the time to go and backpack around, Poland or where have you. That said, if you're looking to fly to Western Europe, a lot of these places are open, COVID rules are coming down. And you can feel relatively safe about what you're doing. If you're traveling domestically or short-haul international, I'd say, hey, it's a good time to buy tickets. Prices are quite low. The atmosphere is very competitive, but be aggressive. Lock in good fares now because, again, we might see higher fares in the near future.
All right, Willis Orlando with Scott's Cheap Travel. Thank you so very much for your insight and information, really helping us understand how this war has affected all the global flying situation. All right, take good care.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, the San Francisco Standard has some insightful and heart-wrenching conversations, really, with local 6th grade students about having their lives disrupted by the pandemic. We'll be right back, and you'll hear what they have to say.
In commercial break.
Oh, okay. I found that to be super informative. We have another segment coming back with our partner, the Standard, so stick around. ABC7 is excited about our partnership with the digital news site, the San Francisco Standard. Part of building a better Bay Area at ABC7 is highlighting those who are working toward the same mission of improving the quality of life for everyone. The Standard's deep and insightful reporting on the challenges in the city does just that. Today, we're talking with the Standard about the emotional and educational toll the pandemic has taken on children. Reporter Sarah Wright sat down with 6th graders from James Denman Middle School, that's near Balboa Park between the Outer Mission and Mission Terrace, to reflect on the past 2 years.
Do you think that school felt harder or easier when you came back?
I forgot like most of the things I learned in 5th grade math.
I didn't even pay attention during 5th grade math. I have no clue what was happening.
Would you say that, like, how you're feeling has changed at all over the past 2 years?
I really don't have nothing to do anymore, so we just try to keep ourselves busy and stuff.
From the mouths of children. Several students said they lost touch with their friends as they stayed away from the classroom and learned from home. Joining us now is Sarah Wright, the reporter you heard in that piece from the SF Standard. Sarah, thanks for coming in virtually and sharing your story with us. We've reported extensively on the impact of the pandemic on kids, but we, meaning all of us in the media, rarely sit down and hear directly from the kids. But you did it. What inspired this approach for you, and when did you do those interviews?
Yeah, so we've heard a lot about students experiencing trauma during the pandemic, but it's mostly from adults. It's mostly from teachers, parents, and so we wanted to hear directly from the students what it was like over the past 2 years. We got to connect with the teacher and got to get inside a classroom to really have a reflective discussion about learning from home, dealing with the pandemic, and then coming back to school and what that's all been like.
They seem so open with you. What were some of the common themes they shared?
So the biggest theme, like you said, that came out was trauma. A lot of the students were dealing with fear. They were dealing with fear of the pandemic, fear for their family members, who many of them, contracted the virus. And then also this sense of loss. I think being away from the classroom wasn't just hard on their education, it was also hard on them socially. And what we heard from students is they lost friends, they lost touch with their community, and that, has had a lasting effect on them.
San Francisco was one of the last, if not the last, local school to reopen, the school district to reopen and welcome students back. Did the kids talk about not having that structure for so long?
Yeah, definitely. They said one of the biggest challenges was figuring out how to do school from home. They talked about math being a particularly difficult subject, and just logging in and trying to do group work remotely didn't quite feel right. The thing too about these students is they're 6th graders now, but when they left the classroom, they were in 4th grade. So that was elementary school. And now that they're coming back, it's a whole new school, it's a whole new campus. They're meeting new teachers. And so I think that adjustment has been pretty difficult for the students as well.
Yeah, especially I also think about the kids who left as freshmen and came back as juniors, upperclassmen, getting ready to apply to college if that's their path, and so much responsibility at once. Do you wonder if they have recovered, if you will, if they've bounced back? When you talk about the loss, has that all been recovered, or are they continuing to suffer that loss?
Yeah, so something that their teacher, Rory, said, she sees these cohorts of kids come every year. And at first she was pretty worried. She said there did seem to be some loss. But at this point, her message was that the kids are back up to speed. It's maybe a little uncomfortable. The social stuff is maybe a little bit difficult still. But in terms of learning, they're right back at it. And so that's kind of a really exciting thing to hear from their teacher.
That is fantastic. Yeah, the 6th grade teacher you talked with, a 20-year veteran who was pretty emotional herself. Did she address if the pandemic changed how she approaches her students or teaching?
Yeah, so she really talked about how it's been a teaching revolution. So during the pandemic, it was up to teachers to kind of adapt their entire job to this new learning situation. And teachers started utilizing more online tools, connecting with the kids in new ways. And she said going forward, those skills are only going to make school better for everyone.
Did she point out what she thought the biggest change was in her students? I mean, if she taught that grade for a long time, I wonder if she noticed a difference between this year's 6th grade class versus pre-pandemic 6th grade class, and what they're able to do and their maturity level and that type of thing, development-wise.
Yeah, the biggest thing she pointed out was following instructions actually was difficult for kids. So stringing together sort of a series of instructions and getting through a whole class period without needing sort of individualized help. So that was a major change. She also pointed out the way the kids interact with each other, particularly during recess or sort of outside of the classroom. It looked like, they were playing the types of games and talking in circles like fourth graders would, when in fact they're sixth graders, and sixth graders normally are a little bit more independent, a little bit more social, and a little bit more able to sort of take on these instructions and these new challenges. So that was the big difference she highlighted.
All right, but I know ultimately there was an optimistic message, and they are recovering and soldiering on. They are tough. Sarah, thank you so very much. Appreciate you sharing that with us. Stick around because we'll continue to chat when we take a commercial break. But we do have links to the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on our website, abc7news.com. And to watch more ABC7 segments featuring the San Francisco Standard's city-focused journalism, check out our ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app and scroll down to the SF Standard shelf. We'll be right back. All right, I'm still here with Sarah Wright from the San Francisco Standard, who did that series of great interviews with the kids in the sixth grade class. It was almost like did you just hang out with them for a day? Like you were one of the kids just kind of hanging out, watching them as they went through their school day?
Yeah, so we arrived at lunchtime, which was a little chaotic. It's a middle school. I forgot what it's like to be in a middle school at lunchtime. Yeah. But we got to see kind of the classes go in and out. We were kind of hanging around while Rory was teaching other classes. And but most importantly, we got kind of this uninterrupted about an hour with the students to really just dive into, how they're feeling. And it took a little time to get them to warm up to us. We did a couple of exercises to build trust and kind of get them to open up.
Wow, may have to do that with coworkers sometimes too. It seems like a good exercise to do anyway. But were most of them eager to share with you after you did that?
Absolutely, yeah. There's always some students that are more vocal than others for sure, but we got to hear from every single student, which I thought was really powerful, to kind of hear the different experiences. Some students found that, the pandemic was actually a good thing for them and they thrived under those circumstances and found learning easier. Others found it a lot harder. So it was really valuable to be able to listen to and share all of those experiences.
Why did you pick James Denman Middle School? Any particular reason?
We had a really good conversation with their teacher. So I had been talking to Rory just about the school district in general. And at the end of some of our interviews, she kept saying, hey, you got to talk to my kids. They have these really powerful experiences to share. I've been trying to write them down, but it's hard to capture them. So she said, come on in, bring your cameras and we'll have a sit down.
Well, that was fantastic. I'm glad you did it. It's definitely eye-opening. I hope everybody will check it out. Sarah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3, on air and on live stream, answering your questions. World News Tonight is coming up next, and I'll see you back here at 4 o'clock. Bye-bye.